Hi everyone, Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. In today's podcast, we're going to focus on improving bloating after eating. And I'm going to try to give you 3 tips to really help you improve bloating after eating. As always, before you make any changes to your diet, lifestyle, supplementation, medications, anything with your health, consult with your primary care physician to make sure that it's right for you. The first thing that I want to address is why do we bloat after eating? And there are a ton of reasons that you might bloat after eating. I'm really going to focus on the top 2 that usually we're able to support with dietary, some lifestyle, and then some temporary supplementation changes. Okay, those are the things I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on poor digestive enzyme production and low stomach acidity. But there are a lot of other reasons. And I have a few. If you're watching the video version of our podcast on YouTube, you'll see I have a slide pulled up with a few of the most common possibilities for bloating after eating that I see in practice. Now, I consult with people across the United States and around the world, and I work a lot with autoimmune conditions, primarily Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition against the thyroid that results in low thyroid hormone output. And it's the number one cause of hypothyroidism or low thyroid hormone production. It is an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the thyroid, the gland gets destroyed over time, and then the capacity of your thyroid to produce thyroid hormone declines. And that results in hypothyroidism and all the negative consequences of that. And that is primarily what I work with. And as a result of that, because I work with autoimmunity, because Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition, I see a lot of other autoimmune conditions, because people that have one autoimmune condition have a high chance, a high probability of having at least one additional. So I see often, I see Hashimoto's and I'll see people that have inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease or colitis or celiac disease. So I do see a lot of digestive issues from an autoimmune perspective, but I also will see things like small bowel overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, referred to as SIBO, and I'll see SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And these can be really difficult to work with. They can be really, really challenging. And I think that it's really difficult with these bacterial and fungal overgrowths of the small intestine. It can be really difficult to get rid of it and then keep it away and keep the bacteria balanced in the small intestine. It's a really complex system. I mean, everything in the digestive tract everything in the body is interconnected and dependent on other systems and other functions. But when you're talking about the digestive tract, you really have to look from north to south. And this was taught to me by one of my favorite teachers of functional medicine, Datis Karazian, and he explained a concept of when you're looking at digestive dysfunction, you want to start from north and go south. So you want to look at the mouth, and you want to look at the ability to produce saliva. You want to make sure the person's obviously chewing their food, because not only does that break down the food, it activates the sensory nerves and the nerves in the brainstem that are responsible for activating the digestive tract below the stomach, the stomach acid production, stomach acid churning, the motility of your small intestine, and the release of pancreatic enzymes and bile from the gallbladder. These are all things that are interconnected. I mean, when you're chewing food, you're actually priming the nervous system and activating pools of neurons, of nerve cells in the brainstem that are actively stimulating. They're being stimulated, and they're activating the GI tract below to prepare the GI tract for food. It's basically a signal. Hey, food is on the way. We're chewing food. It's coming down. Ramp up the stomach acid production. Get ready to digest. That's what it's doing. So when you see someone that has overgrowth of small intestinal bacteria or fungal issues, there are so many potential points in the digestive tract that may be breaking down. And if anyone tells you that they have these things mastered and they figured it out, well, I want to learn from them, because I've gone through a lot of training on small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And I have seen things work for one person that do not work for another. And I've seen people that, they'll be there are antibiotics that can be prescribed that will wipe out the bacteria. But the problem is keeping those bacteria from regrowing, because whatever the underlying dysfunction is that's causing the small intestine to overgrow with bacteria or fungi, that has to be addressed. Or what you'll see is that they'll take an antibiotic, and then over a period of time, the issues come back. And this can be there's so many potential reasons for this. Now that's why I'm not going into addressing small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and small intestinal fungal overgrowth specifically in this video. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about, I've absolutely used to help people that have SIBO and SIFO, and it has helped them significantly. But this is not intended to address those things because they're far too complex and they're very individualized. And even when you do all this individualized workup, it's very difficult to get rid of SIBO, get rid of SIFO, and keep them away. So want to address that, because a lot of people that listen to this will be like, yes, I bloat. And guess what? You may have SIBO or SIFO. So those are tricky, or those are much more complex. So I can't address it here, but I wanted to talk about it and at least let you know that, that's something that I commonly see. That's becoming a much more common problem. And I'll say one last thing about them so I don't spend all of our time here. One of the things that's kind of interesting, and a concept that I have I've seen discussed, and is that potentially the use of probiotics. We take these basically bacteria orally to repopulate our GI tract. And, the idea is that it helps us to balance our gut bacteria that may be imbalanced, and that's definitely a good thing. However, this didn't used to be as big of an issue, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or fungal overgrowth, and now we're seeing it all the time. Why is that? One theory is that the probiotics that everyone is taking may actually be causing dysbiosis and contributing somewhat to it. So it is, like I said, you think you know something, and the one thing that I can say is stay humble and continually try to learn and listen to what people say they are experiencing. That's what I try to do when I'm working with people. Is I have these ideas, this training and courses and things that I've gone through to help people with different issues and support optimal physiology and digestion. But when the rubber meets the road and you're working with someone, you really have to listen to what's going on with that individual and tailor what you do based on how they're responding. Whether or not you think your plan should work or not, it's all about the individual. And that's why there's a lot of these things you have to take a very what I call bio-individualized approach. So it has to be unique to the person, right? So what I really like to do, now I'm going to be sharing information with you that you can implement on your own to improve digestion, to support more optimal and more normal digestion. However, when I work with people one-on-one, what I like to do is gather as much information as possible, as much history and data on them that we can, as many tests as we can, to give us the very best starting point so that we can be more precise with what we do, because there are a lot of possibilities. Okay, so I've gone on and on about the SIBO and SIFO, but it needed to be addressed here because a lot of people will come to this video for information on that, because it's a problem. And the fifth possibility, the things that I see in practice, are inflammatory bowel diseases or other pathology. So inflammatory bowel diseases, I mentioned that earlier. I see, because I work with autoimmunity, I see a lot of other autoimmune conditions, and those are typically related to the autoimmune conditions of the gut, the inflammatory bowel diseases. Those will come with Hashimoto's in a lot of cases, because people have, if you have one autoimmune condition, you have about a 50% chance of having at least a second one. And whenever we do, whenever I'm working with someone, I will oftentimes, especially if they're autoimmune, I will oftentimes recommend a multiple tissue antibody panel that looks at it's close to 30 different tissues in the human body to see if you're producing antibodies against them. And that's one of the best ways to understand whether or not you have an immune response against some of your own tissues. It's a great way to assess whether or not the immune system is attacking some of your own tissues. And I'll often recommend that because we want to know where else the autoimmunity is. Because once we find one autoimmune condition, again, there's a high probability of having another autoimmune condition, and it can be helpful from a lot of different perspectives to know where the rest of the autoimmunity lies, because you can get a better idea of problems that are developing and whether or not they're coming from an autoimmune process. You can also, based on different tissues, there are some highly likely pathogens, like bacteria, for example, that may be contributing to autoimmunity against a particular tissue. So, there can be it can be helpful in reverse engineering and getting a better understanding of things that might be driving or triggering that autoimmune reactivity against the tissue. So those are the primary things that I wanted to address up front. Why do we bloat after eating? The main things that we want to focus on here are poor digestive enzyme production and low stomach acidity. So tip number 1 to prevent bloating after eating: don't neglect chewing. Now this sounds so basic and so elementary. You're like, oh my gosh, this is like so not revolutionary. I get it, right? I know it's not revolutionary, but to a lot of people, I guarantee you, if you have digestive issues and you pay attention to how many times you chew, you're not chewing enough. Minimum you should be chewing 10 times per bite, but you should really be hitting around 30. Some people even say, 50, you should be chewing like 50 times per bite. Do that. Focus on how many times you're chewing with each bite of food, and you're going to come to a realization that you're not chewing enough. Most people, not everyone, but the large majority of people that I work with, they do not chew enough. People are in too much of a hurry. Life is so hurried that they'll often see eating almost as an inconvenience, and that's a mistake as well. If you're in a hurry and you don't have time for anything, you're often in a state of sympathetic nervous system drive. Okay, so your nervous system has a division called the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has two divisions, primarily the parasympathetic, which is referred to as the rest and digest system, and then the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight system. And whenever these divisions, each division is activated, it has different physiological effects throughout the body. So if you're under stress and you're in a hurry and maybe you've had a bunch of caffeine and you're all ramped up, that's not the very best time to eat, because that will tend to drive physiology that's more associated with fight or flight, with running and getting away from something, not resting and digesting. You need to be in a calm state. You need to slow down. You really this is something that's it's neglected so much, is the understanding or the lack of respect for the state of the person's nervous system at the time that they're eating. And I'm just what I'm really trying to emphasize here is that you need to slow down. And if you're in a hurry, or if you're under a lot of stress, or if you're really jacked up on caffeine, it's probably you're not going to have the best digestion. And that's simply because you've activated the sympathetic nervous system, which causes, one of the things it does is it causes vasoconstriction. So the constriction of vessels in your abdomen pushes blood to the extremities and to the skeletal muscle, causes dilation of your airways, causes dilation of your pupils so you can take in more light. Everything is fight or flight, right? You need to be more in a parasympathetic state where you're rest and digest, where you can break down food, you can assimilate it, your body's in a state of repair. That's where you need to be when you're eating. But focusing on chewing is one of the easiest things that anyone can do. And this has a lot of different effects. It's a critical part of digestion. It activates neurological signaling to the digestive tract that food is coming. It primes the gut. Chewing is critically important, so don't neglect it. Definitely tip number 1, chew your food. Minimum 10 times. Shoot for 30 times per bite. Tip number 2 to prevent bloat after eating is to consider stomach acidity. Okay, stomach acidity is so important. You've got to ask yourself if there's an issue with the stomach acid, if you're having problems with digestion, if you're bloating especially. because as we get older, our ability to concentrate the acid and make it sufficient really for protein digestion and for the digestive functions that are dependent upon it, it becomes less and less. And so one of the things that I've seen very commonly cause this, again, is Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. Whenever you have poor thyroid hormone physiology, and I'm not just talking about low thyroid hormone levels, because that's not the same thing as thyroid hormone physiology. Thyroid hormone levels is part of thyroid hormone physiology, but you have to look at, when you're really considering how is the thyroid working, you have to look at the production of thyroid hormone, you have to look at the ability of the body to transport thyroid hormone through the bloodstream and get it to the tissues of the body where it's needed. You have to look at sensitivity of the cells, the cells of the body to thyroid hormone that's in circulation, because there can be issues with sensitivity at the cell. The cell may not be able to respond to it efficiently. And then detoxification of the hormone. These are all critical steps to any and every hormone in the body. So whenever there's an endocrine problem, so whenever there's a hormonal problem, a blood sugar issue, you have to rule out the thyroid. And the reason for that, as a primary contributing factor to the other hormone issues, you have to rule out the thyroid, because every single cell in the body is dependent upon thyroid hormone to function normally. So if you have any problems with your thyroid hormone physiology, with the production of the hormone, with the transportation of the thyroid hormone through the bloodstream, with sensitivity at the cell, or with detoxification, you're compromising the physiology of every cell. Every single cell, and this includes the cells of the stomach that produce your stomach acid. So this is extremely common in people that have low thyroid function, because the thyroid hormone is critical for normal physiology, and acid production is one part of physiology that is impacted. So this is something that I've seen quite a bit in the particular group of people that I work with most often. So what you might want to consider doing, and again, consult with your doctor to make sure that this is appropriate for you. One of the things you might want to consider doing is trying apple cider vinegar in the morning or before your major meals. So typically that would be like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The way that I do it is I'll use about a teaspoon, and you'll have to, this varies from person to person, but I'll use about a half of a teaspoon to a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar with a few ounces of water, about 3 ounces typically. And I'll drink that with a straw just to get it past my teeth, so you're not pulling acid across your teeth and the enamel of your teeth. You definitely don't want to do that. But I'll just put a straw like in the back of my mouth, and I'll drink it that way. And I'll do that a few times a day, typically morning. Like I like to do it in the morning when I wake up. I have an empty stomach. It's a great time for me. Now, everyone would be different, and again, it might not be appropriate for you. Talk to your doctor. But then again, I'll do it at night, typically in the evening. I like to do it before I eat my last meal, because it does help. It helps me with digestion. I can just tell. I feel like I break down the food better, and I have better bowel movements when I do this. So there are some things physiologically that it's doing. I think it's stimulating better release of enzymes from my pancreas and a better release of bile from my gallbladder that's helping to break down the food more efficiently and thoroughly. So you can try that. That's something that you might want to see if that helps. And then you could also alternatively use a supplement of betaine HCl. Now, this supplement helps to increase the concentration of stomach acid. And it's kind of nice to use it. Sometimes it's better than the apple cider vinegar because, for one, it doesn't taste like apple cider vinegar. It's not apple cider vinegar, but it doesn't taste like apple cider vinegar, which turns off a lot of people. And then also it is, it comes in milligrams, typically 100 or 200 milligrams per capsule, and you can titrate it up or down depending on your response. So that is also something that I've used with a lot of my clients, and that has been very, very helpful. And so you could try some of those things and see if it changes your bloating. And typically you would want to do these things again before meals, before the bigger meals especially, and meals that have larger amounts of protein in them. Okay. Tip number 3 to prevent bloat after eating is to consider digestive enzymes. So we talked about stomach acidity and how important it is, but you also have digestive enzymes that are released by your pancreas and by your gallbladder when food leaves the stomach and moves into the small intestine. When the food leaves the stomach and moves into the small intestine, the acidity of the bolus of food that leaves the stomach and moves into the small intestine triggers the pancreas and the gallbladder to release enzymes and bile to mix with the food to help with the breaking down of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, as well as with the emulsification of the fats in your food so that you can absorb the fats and the fat-soluble vitamins that are in the food. And this is a reason that I think a lot of people might be deficient in vitamins A, D, E, and K. Those are your fat-soluble vitamins. If you have poor gallbladder, poor bile release, there's often poor absorption of fat. If you have poor absorption of fat, there is usually going to be a problem with those fat-soluble vitamins. The only way you can get them in is if they absorb with fat. So this is something that can be a major issue for people. But the release of these enzymes is in part dependent on the acidity of the bolus of food that leaves the stomach and moves into the small intestine. If there's not a strong enough concentration of acid, you may get a suboptimal release of these enzymes. And this is something that's really important for digestion. It's very important for maintaining the balance of bacteria in the gut. It's important from an immunological perspective as well, because the enzymes that are released from your pancreas, they break down proteins in foods. And the goal is to break down those proteins into their most basic building blocks, which are called amino acids. Okay, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And a protein is basically a chain of amino acids. And the enzymes that your pancreas releases, they help to cut each one of those links of that protein chain apart. And the amino acids, those individual links of the protein, they can be easily absorbed through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, and the body uses those for all of its physiological processes and repair. So this is something that is extremely important to human health and physiology. I use digestive enzymes quite a bit with people that are autoimmune, unless they have an inflammatory bowel disease. I do not use them if we know that we have an inflammatory bowel disease. I'm very cautious about the use of any type of enzymes, because a lot of those people that have inflammatory bowel diseases, they don't have a good mucus layer. And when you don't have a good mucus layer, then you have exposed microvilli, which are the finger-like projections that point inward into the GI tract. They're part of the cells that line the intestinal wall, and they have these finger-like projections called microvilli. It looks like shag carpet that point inward into the gut, and their enzymes produced there. There's a lot of things they have. They give your gut more surface area. They help with absorption, but they should be covered by a mucus layer. And if that mucus layer is gone and they're exposed, and you're putting in a significant number of enzymes, you might be digesting them. And that's not going to be a favorable outcome or thing that you want to do. So you do want to be careful. Like I said, with all these things, you want to talk to your doctor first, and always listen to your body, but definitely talk to your doctor and make sure that it's appropriate for you to try any of these things. But this is, it's really common to see these digestive enzymes to be insufficient whenever the stomach acidity is low. And it's something that, they're readily available. We use a lot of physician-only supplements because I know quality controls and I know a lot about them. I've used them clinically, and I know I've had good outcomes with them. But pancreatic enzymes are pretty readily available, just about anywhere that you'd shop for vitamins. So, sometimes they're called digestive enzymes. And sometimes you'll see the digestive enzymes, they'll have the pancreatic enzymes, but then they'll also have like some betaine with HCl. So they'll combine it into, some stomach acid support with some enzymes, and those can be good as well. It really depends on your unique needs. But this can be, and for a lot of people has been a game changer for their they're bloating. So this is something that you definitely want to have in the back of your mind as a potential tool to help you, and that is pancreatic enzymes. There was one other thing as I was putting together my list. I was like, you know what, I've got to do a fourth thing or fourth way to prevent bloating after eating, because this is such a huge issue. I see this all the time. And this is, could your bloating be caused by your gallbladder or a gallbladder issue? And this is extremely common in women that are around 40 years of age, and it's even more common in women that are either overweight or obese. And this is sluggish gallbladder or gallstones. They can create major issues for digestion. It really happens, or typically happens, after eating foods that are higher in fat. And one of the issues is that if you eat the foods that are higher in fat and your gallbladder doesn't release bile very efficiently, then the fat doesn't get emulsified. It doesn't get broken down and absorbed as well, and you'll have poor digestion. There's typically a lot of gas. But one of the telltale signs, you can have a lot of pain as well. That is kind of most commonly, if you're having a gallbladder issue, you'll feel it under in your back, right under your right shoulder blade. That's typically where the referred pain from the gallbladder will show up. But this is textbook stuff. You can look it up and see, referred pain from the gallbladder will often go there to under the right shoulder blade. But this usually occurs with the consumption of fat, typically high-fat foods. A lot of people end up avoiding foods that they know cause them digestive issues, and this can give you a lot of information. If it's fat and if it causes gas, and especially if you notice your stool color changing from tan to dark colors without really changing your diet, that's also a red flag that you're not releasing bile. And if there's a lot of times there's tenderness right under the edge of the right rib cage. Whenever you do a physical exam on someone, you can actually check this. You can check the gallbladder and see if it's tender by having them lay on their back and have them inhale and then exhale. And as they exhale, you push up and under the rib on the right side where the gallbladder and the liver are. And if it's tender in there, that's also an exam sign. But you'll for things that you can do relatively easily on your own is you can look at your stool when you move your bowels. You can look at the stool in the toilet, see if it floats. If it's floating, that's one sign that there may be a higher fat content. If it has like frothy little bubbles around it, that's another sign that there's an increased amount of fat in the stool. And then if you look across the water and you see a sheen of fat, that's another good sign that you're not absorbing fat and that there could be a gallbladder issue. So all of these things point to a problem with the gallbladder. And because it's extremely common in women around the age of 40, more common with being overweight and obese, but you do not have to be overweight and obese to have gallbladder issues. You can have a normal weight and still have all of these problems, but it seems to be more common with overweight and obese women. So this is something I wanted to mention. This is something you really there's not a lot of great stuff that you can do. A lot of people, if they're trying to avoid having surgery or if they want to see if it resolves, first of all, you have to know what's happening. So you really need to see your doctor. They need to, typically they'll do an exam, and then usually they'll do some type of imaging. Ultrasounds of the gallbladder are real common. They'll do an ultrasound and they'll look at it and they'll see if there's stones. They'll also be able to observe if it's you'll hear the word sluggish used, where they'll say the bile is more thick, and you'll get a radiology report, which is after the ultrasound is done, a radiologist will read it, they'll dictate a report, and they'll tell you what they see. That needs to be done so that you can get a better idea of what you're dealing with, because if you have gallstones, which can form, there are these stones that form in the gallbladder. Those stones if they start to move, they can block your bile duct. And if they block the bile duct, it's basically an emergency surgery. And there's a ton of pain. There's typically a lot of nausea. Vomiting is very common. You'll see vomiting of like green bile. You can even see that in your stool sometimes. So, these are all reasons like that's a medical emergency. I mean, you have to have like an emergency surgery to remove the gallbladder. So if you're experiencing any of these symptoms with the gallbladder, go ahead and see your primary care physician. Say, hey, this is what's going on. I think I got something going on with my digestion. It might be my gallbladder. They'll probably do an exam, see if there's tenderness. If there's tenderness, and based on your history, they'll probably recommend an ultrasound. They'll do an ultrasound, then based on that information, you'll know more. And a more specific plan can be developed. People that I've worked with, I've worked with people that don't have gallbladders, people that have gallbladder problems that are trying to avoid surgery. And that's tricky because I have not seen gallbladder issues resolve very frequently. Maybe once or twice out of, I think thousands of people at this point. So, that I've worked with, but I would say hundreds that have gallbladder issues. I've worked with a lot of people with gallbladder issues. So, there are all these different ideas, and you can read things about resolving gallbladder problems or healing the gallbladder, and there's probably a way to do it. I just don't know exactly how that's accomplished. Higher fiber diets is one thing, though that can be a problem for some people that have bacterial overgrowth of the small intestine, but typically like higher fiber diets, drinking more water, making sure you're not hypothyroid, lower fat diets, at least for a significant period of time. There are a lot of different theories on this. There are various supplements out there that will help to thin the bile, but you just really need to know what you're working with and understand that, when I work with people that have gallbladder issues, I always make sure they understand, like, look, if you have stones or if you have a gallbladder issue, you could have a gallbladder attack. Especially if you have stones, you can have a gallbladder stone to move, block your bile duct, and you have to have emergency surgery. So anything that we do, you've got to understand that that's always a possibility, and we couldn't predict that, and it'd be hard to know if anything that we do would contribute to that. So it has to be like an accepted, potential risk that's been very, very small in my experience, but still possible that you accept going forward. That's one of the things that I think is really important to consider. But this is a huge issue. I wanted to mention it. I wish I had some like really great tips for you on how to address it without surgery, but that's, just has not been my experience. I hope whenever I have people that have gallbladder issues, I'm hopeful that we're able to improve their digestion and their function, their physiology to the degree that they're like, it doesn't really bother me anymore. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen many times. But you really have to be aware that the gallbladder can be a major, major cause of bloating after eating. Okay, so to summarize, and before we summarize, if you bloat after eating, definitely see your doctor so you can get a better starting point for understanding why you're bloating in the first place. That's always the key. Like, just the more information you have up front, the more specific plan you're going to be able to put together to help you improve your health. So the more data that you have and that you can start with, it's the better starting point. Otherwise, you're just guessing and you have really no idea what's causing the problems that you're having, and that's not a great way to go about it. So in summary, 3 tips to improve bloating after eating. Number 1, chew 10 to 30 times per bite. Number 2, consider low stomach acidity. Things that you might want to consider trying after consulting with your doctor, as with all of these things, consult with your doctor first, is trying about a teaspoon. And you have to see, some people can use more, some people will use less. A teaspoon of apple cider vinegar with a few ounces of water. That's what I like to do, like probably 2 to 3 ounces of water. I drink it with a straw, put the straw in opening the back of my throat, back of my mouth, so that I can swallow and not pull the vinegar across my teeth and destroy my enamel. So we don't want to do that, but you can try some apple cider vinegar in the morning on an empty stomach, or before breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just before breakfast and dinner. You could add it in any way. People do it a lot of different ways, but it may assist with digestion. And the second thing that you can do for if there's low stomach acidity is you may want to consider betaine with HCl. It's a supplement that you can utilize. And there are different titration protocols where you start with a low amount and then you work your way up each meal and see if it improves your digestion. That's not a bad option either. The third tip to improve bloating after eating is consider poor digestive enzyme release. And this is really something that is, it's dependent upon chewing thoroughly. It's dependent upon adequate stomach acidity because the stomach acid triggers the release of enzymes. It's dependent upon pancreatic health and function. So one of the things, though, that you might want to consider using are pancreatic enzymes, and these can be purchased as a supplement. Typically, they're labeled as like digestive enzymes, and you can find them just about anywhere that you would purchase supplements. And as a bonus tip, could it be your gallbladder? And there's a lot. I don't want to go into all that here, but you can go back to the bonus section of this podcast and listen to my explanation of gallbladder issues. But gallbladder problems are extremely common in women around 40 years of age, especially if they're overweight or obese. And it's more typical, and you can usually determine if it's a gallbladder issue based on the types of foods that you eat that cause the bloating. And usually it's a high-fat meal that will cause bloating. It will typically cause gas, and then when you should be observing your stool and looking to see if the stool floats. Is there like a frothy, it almost looks like bubbles around it. And is there a sheen of fat on top of the water? Those are all really good signs that there's poor absorption, digestion and absorption of fats. The other thing that I would mention is, does the stool change color from like a brown color to tan? If you're seeing like alternating colors and it's not really associated with a change in your diet, that's also a sign that you're not releasing bile. And these are all things that you need to have checked by your doctor. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I appreciate you hanging out with me and spending this time. If you would like our help, there are several things that we try to make available to the public. We have a huge video library on YouTube. We have podcasts on just about anywhere you want to listen to a podcast, Libsyn, Apple. All of my old podcasts have terrible audio because I just recorded them on my phone, but still good information, I hope. You could also check out our Transforamtion Program. It's a program that I designed to really help people that couldn't work with me one-on-one to try and give them ideas of the dietary, the lifestyle, and the temporary nutritional supplementation strategies that I use with people that I work with one-on-one. Very, very similar. Oftentimes when I work with someone one-on-one, we will use that program as a backbone or as a foundation to just help make sure that they're doing the right dietary and lifestyle and potentially supplementation, taking the right supplementation to help support optimal physiology. And this is a program that you can basically get for free. If you go to thyroidprogram.com, you can purchase our program for literally $1. It's like literally $1 and you get access to the full program. We just charge $1 because whenever I first set it up, we were offering it free and people could just go register with an email. And we had so many. At one point, it just picked up all these registrations, and they were all of these obviously fake registrations that were, I think there was like a bot of some sort that was just registering. And I don't know what the advantage is or why that happens, but what I did was we charged $1 for the program, and that cut out all of that nonsense. So you can go to our website, learn all about it. The program, I have put together, I believe this is the fourth variation of this program. So it is it's a program we've had a lot of great feedback. You can check it out at thyroidprogram.com. That's THYROID program.com, and see if it's something that you are interested in, or if you think it might help you. Definitely sign up for it and check it out. If you're interested in one-on-one assistance, you can visit my website at drbradshuk.com to learn about working with me through distance consulting. That's drbradshok.com, and you can check out learn more about working with me one-on-one if you need that type of help. But I appreciate you hanging out with me today, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.